I do find myself drawn to people who have had some type of experience of loss, or at least are willing to kind of dive in there with me. It's hard for me to be around people who live their lives very superficially and from a place of holding life at arm's length because they've never really experienced loss.
Welcome to Dead Talks. This is your host, David Ferrugio, and this is a podcast where we discuss death, life, and everything in between. We make an uncomfortable conversation a little easier with storytelling, insights, and believe it or not, plenty of laughs. Today's episode, I have my guest, Norman Buckley, who is not only a successful TV director on several shows such as Pretty Little Liars, Gossip Girl, and The OC. He is also a very intelligent and wise man who I had the pleasure of speaking with, and I just really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you do too. Norman speaks about two partners that he's lost over the last couple decades. He'll share their story, his insights, and explains how he's coped and been able to stay so optimistic throughout the years and become the man he is today. And as one final preface leading up to this episode, I was notified by Norman a few days after this was recorded that he lost his brother, Michael J. Buckley. So I'd like to dedicate this episode to his brother, and we will be doing a follow-up episode after this episode speaking about his brother, where he gets a chance to really honor him and tell us a little bit more. So thank you for joining us again, and enjoy another episode of Dead Talks. I have a lovely guest today, Norman Buckley, who I met actually on Instagram, so I guess that's the way we do things these days. He actually reached out to me on a mutual experience, which we're actually about to get into. So, Norm, I don't know if you remember that. Do you remember reaching out to me?
Yeah, of course I do. I remember that I'd seen you on Instagram. I think you were following me, and then I started following you back, and then I somehow became aware that you had lost your father in 9/11, and I was touched by that, and I was pretty deep in my own grief at that point. And so I think I was looking to connect to other people who had an experience of grief just in order to be able to talk about it openly. Because as you know, people have all kinds of weird reactions around someone losing someone that's important to them. So.
Yeah, and that's what kind of hit me the most when you reached out. It was so, it was a powerful way to reach out to someone and just kind of get into it. You know what I mean? So it really struck me. I don't want to get all teary-eyed and whatnot, but it was pretty emotional. Just that fact that you were going through your own stuff and you had the courage to say something to me so openly about it. I think has led us down a path that I'm grateful to have connected with you. I know.
Yeah, me too. I remember we had that first coffee, and that was pretty much all we talked about.
Yeah,
and then I've appreciated your friendship since. So
likewise.
That's been about 3 or 4 years ago now, at least maybe 4 years ago.
Yeah, at least we have our kind of yearly rendezvous to catch up here and there, and we talk about some stuff. That's why it's fun to have you on here. And actually share it with a little bit of the world, because I've learned a lot from you. And one thing that we could probably allude to it eventually. You brought up something about my father, and perhaps we weren't like Dr. Phil on me and diagnosing me, but you did mention something about how there is a potential for my own traumatic experience, how it could potentially affect my relationships, whether romantically and intimately, and I've never really, oddly enough, really tried connecting those two.
I don't think I said that. I don't think I said that to you the first time we met.
No. Last time.
Well into our friendship.
David, nice to meet you. I'm Norm. Your relationship sucks, so this is why.
No, I do remember having that conversation too, but that was a long time later.
Right. I should have prefaced that.
Once we'd actually become friends. Yeah.
No, my point was that was you have a lot of insights that I really want people to hear. That's all.
Well, I do think that the reality is that some people, like ourselves, experience grief at a young age, and in both of our situations, we experience traumatic grief in the fact that the deaths were so sudden. And I think that other people go their whole life and they don't have to really deal with grief until they're much older. And I in some ways, and I know it sounds counterintuitive to say this, but I think there is a real deepening experience that happens when you've had a great loss. And I think that if one is willing to embrace that that's what the experience you've been given is, that there is the real potential for great growth. And I do find myself drawn to people who have had some type of experience of loss, or at least are willing to kind of dive in there with me. It's hard for me to be around people who live their lives very superficially and from a place of holding life at arm's length, because they've never really experienced loss. And so I do think that it's almost like a weird gift. That's the flip side of grief, is the opportunity to have a deeper experience and deeper relationships with the people who come into your life and the friendships that you form. And I certainly feel like that's been the case with our friendship.
Yeah, it's just it's just something that we've mutually experienced, and I think that tends to happen whether it's death or any other experience. When you can share something so intimate like that, it just naturally brings people together.
Yeah, and it was like our first conversation. That first day we had coffee, it just immediately went to a very deep place, which I really enjoy. Not everybody is willing to go there. Even people that have had grief. I'm in a group that I go to once a month when I can, with a lot of other suicide survivors, because as you know, my husband David took his own life. And it's a great experience to be around those people for many reasons. One of them being that I recognize through their experiences what I can't often see about my own, that there was not much I could have done different to have changed the result. But I do recognize too in the group that there are those people who have really, on a certain level, come to grips with the reality of it, versus those that are still very much in denial. And there's a lot of processes of loss, and when one has experienced the death of a loved one, and not everybody gets through that experience of grief in the same way at the same time. And so it's always different with each new encounter you have with someone who suffered through that.
Yeah, that's the interesting too, is, when you hear other people, and that's kind of what you just alluded to is a big point of what we're doing in a sense. I think how you just explained, correct me if I'm wrong, how you kind of heard other people's experiences, how they're handling things, and you learn from that about yourself,
sure.
Or about the process in general, is, you speaking about it, I believe in the way that you just did, can maybe reflect on their own experiences and learn from you and learn about themselves at the same time. So you just mentioned your partner, David, who I knew about, obviously. And if you want to start, telling us a little about him, your experience, or however you feel like starting to start the story, we could take it from there.
Well, I should probably actually back up earlier than that, because, I've been widowed twice. My first significant other, I wasn't married, but I might as well have been, at least in my own internal commitment. I had a significant other in the 80s, a guy named Tim Scott, who I was with from 1983 to when he died in 1988. And he died of AIDS. He was one of the really early HIV victims in New York City. I lost him after we'd been together for 5 years, and that was a long, slow death. And I was only 32 years old at the time that happened. He was 32, I was 32, and it was a transformative experience for me, because I of course wish it had been different for him, but there was something very profound about going through that experience at such a young age, and the fact that it taught me never to take anything for granted, and it taught me to be really present in my relationships. And it took me a long time before I met somebody else, but I did meet my husband, David Whaley, in 2004, and we were together almost exactly 10 years. And during that period of time, he had many ups and downs with his mental health. He was prone to depression, and he was prone to a certain type of dissociative disorder that I think was really brought on by many experiences that he'd had in his upbringing. He'd had a very traumatic childhood and a very abusive experience growing up at the hand of his stepfather. And I do think that there were certain things that were broken there that were just never going to be fixed. I had a really happy relationship with him in spite of all that, though, and we had a very solid, supportive, encouraging relationship for the 10 years we were together. I don't think we ever fought. I don't think we ever had any kind of situation that impacted upon the closeness that we felt. But there was this encroaching mental illness that got much better for a really long period of time. He was a very successful painter at the end of his life, and things were going really well, but seemed to really take a bad turn for the worse. The last 3 months of his life, he really fell into a deep depression. I think even more than that, fell into psychosis, a lot of paranoia, and a lot of real distorted thinking. And so he did take his life in October of 2014. He had left our house, disappeared for a couple of days, and went to a hotel. And I did track him to the hotel, but by the time I tracked him there by our credit cards, he had already taken his life. And it's an ambiguous loss. It's one of those things that I will never fully understand. I'll never completely be able to get to the bottom of it. But I will say that I am grateful for the 10 years I had with him. I wish it had been longer, or I wish it had been something that I could have helped him through. But there were issues there that were just greater than what I can understand. And I don't think that one overrides the survival instinct easily. I don't think one just suddenly decides like, oh, I don't want to live anymore. I think that there's a real breakdown in the cognitive functions. And so I'm not somebody who believes it's just, I really get irritated when I hear anybody say that it's a selfish choice, that suicide is a selfish choice. I think that really indicates to me somebody who doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. So, it's been a journey. It's been 6 years now, and I feel like I'm doing really well, but it was a very long, deep grieving process. And when I met you, I was still really deep in the pain of it. It was not something that was easy for me at all. And I as I said, I felt drawn to people who had experiences that were equally cataclysmic. And I think that was when I found out about your father's death. I just, my heart went out to you, because I just felt like that's, not only a personal loss, but it's a collective loss. And, I just always felt that we had something in common just from the very beginning, by the fact that we'd both gone through these horrendous losses.
Yep. Well, the two stories are just they are so different, in that you highlighted that your first partner, it was a longer process, correct?
Yeah. And in fact, I was thinking about it today, actually, knowing that I was going to talk to you tonight. I was thinking about the fact that, it was one of those situations where he was so ill at the end of his life that it was almost a relief when he finally died. It was, there were many good times, but the last 2 months of his life were pretty awful, and he was in a coma for the last 2 weeks of his life. So by the time he died, there was almost a sense of, well, thank God for him that he no longer has to be in that state of suffering. So they were very different kinds of losses, but I will say my grief was just as great in both situations. I know I said this the other day on a podcast. I said, I was doing another podcast, and I said, I know a lot of people who've known me through both relationships. They tend to look at my life and they view it as tragic. And I said, there has been a tragic component to my life without a doubt, but that's not the way I would define my life or my experience of either one of those relationships. I was extremely fortunate to be with both of those people. They really enhanced my life and offered me a great deal. And if I had to do it over again, I would do it over again. Even if somebody said to me, you're going to lose these two people in really tragic ways and you won't know when, I would still say, well, bring it on, because the relationships had that much meaning for me. So
that's beautiful. So in regards to the two, you did mention that, obviously there's inequality in regards to the grieving process, but can you pinpoint anything in regards to any differences in the grieving process because of how they each happened? How one was as if you knew it was coming? Is that what it was?
Yeah. Well, I think definitely that I knew that I definitely knew that Tim was dying, and so there was a preparation for it. So I think that on a certain level, I gradually made my peace with what was happening. The second relationship, David. I was shocked. It was a shock to me. I knew that he was having real issues. I knew that he was really struggling with depression, and I knew that he was really struggling with paranoia. But I did not know that he was feeling suicidal. There was no indication to me that he was suicidal. And now looking back, I see all kinds of things I should have noticed,
right,
that I should have paid attention to. But I didn't know it at the time. And I think that the shock of it was much harder for me. The nature of the suddenness of it, the fact that one day I'm feeling that this person is here in my life, and then the next day they're suddenly gone, was a huge shock to me. And I even think it affected me physically. I think it really my body, I think, went into a state of shock. For quite some time. There was a period of time where I just felt almost incapable of doing anything. There was a good 2 months after he died where I didn't do anything at all.
Right. You were telling me, I haven't, I've known you for 3 years now or so. And even from that limited time, if I do recollect the first conversation that we had from the last time we met, when I really do think about it, I feel like I honestly I can tell there was a growth, and I don't know what it wasn't so much in just the way you spoke verbally. It was, I don't know, your mannerisms, your energy. I definitely have noticed some sort of, I don't know if it's further along the grieving process or whatever the hell you did. Tell us your secret, write a book or something.
Well, I'm sure that's so, because I was so deeply saddened by David's loss. There was a part of me that just felt like my life was over. It really did. I don't feel that way anymore. And I do think that the death of my first significant other, that's been 30 some odd years ago now. So I'm very able to look at his life and see, well, that was it. That was his complete life. It took me a long time to get to that place with David's death, of realizing, well, that David's life is also complete. It's not like he's coming back. There's almost a denial that goes on. I don't know if you experienced this after the death of your father, but I really went through a sense of real denial that it had happened. I kept thinking that he was just away somewhere, that he would come back, that he would reappear, that he would come walking through the door, even though I knew that intellectually that wasn't so. I'm talking about on a gut level, on a feeling level. And I found it very hard to kind of just accept the fact that his life was complete, that it was over. And I think with time, one starts to come to that recognition and that realization. And sometimes people get there really quickly, and sometimes they don't. It took me a while. And I think two things too that happened after David died. I dove into work. I started working a lot. I think in the year 2015, I directed 15 episodes of television, which is a huge amount of work to do in a single year. That's all I wanted to do, was just go to work. If I had work to do, then I would feel basically shielded from these deep feelings of loss. And I also drank a lot. I realized that now, I mean, I don't want to be melodramatic about it and suggest I had a drinking problem, because I had no problem stopping at the point that I finally did. But I do think I was anesthetizing myself against the loss by drinking a lot. I'm sure that when I first met you, I was a 2 martini a night type of guy, because I drank a lot. And I do realize that alcohol has a deadening effect. It has a way of just standing between you and your feelings. And part of the healing, I think, that happens after any loss is to feel your feelings fully and to get through them, to go through the crucible of whatever it is you need to feel about it, not to distance yourself from it. So when I first met you, I was a heavy drinker in the evenings, and definitely had a different experience just by the virtue of I was holding off a lot of my really, I want to say, positive feelings about the relationship that can carry me forward into my life, because I do believe that there is a level in which you get to a place of acceptance where almost like the person's spirit becomes integrated into your own soul, and you are able to move forward, which I definitely feel now. I think that I was probably grieving Tim, my first significant other. I was probably grieving his loss leading up to his death, and so maybe I got through it a little faster. Whereas David's death was such a shock to me that it took me a long time to kind of come to a new awareness in dealing with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like one was slowly ripping off the Band-Aid, the other one was just a quick rip, and in the opposite effect, because that shock factor is real. And I feel like, in my opinion, that shock factor almost offers a delay in the process of understanding it, because it's such a traumatic event out of nowhere that it's almost like your body goes in defense mode. I want to ask you, in regards to, you mentioned denial, and then whether going to work or drinking to potentially distract you. I don't know if that's the correct word, or perhaps was that what it was? It was like, obviously you want to keep your mind busy, but did that also, when you mentioned it was a longer process perhaps to get over it, was it because you were so distracted just to avoid it that eventually it all came to and hit you back to once where you started feeling things again?
Well, I think that work and even alcohol, can be a good thing too. I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with finding ways to anesthetize yourself when you're in extreme pain. But I do believe that for growth to happen and for movement forward to happen at a certain point, you have to be able to look at the situation as fully as possible, and to feel the feelings around it. I wouldn't say that I went back to square one. No, I feel like that all of that, the entire period of grieving, both during the period of time when I was a workaholic and drinking too much, and also, when I was then starting to go into my various grief groups and listen to other people's stories, all of that was part of the healing process. I don't think that there's a place you suddenly get to where, okay, now I'm dealing with it. I've been dealing with it all the way along. I've been dealing with it all along. But learning as I go what works. Learning as I go what's really going to lead me to the greatest growth as a human being. And I do think that if you're just trying to anesthetize yourself the whole time, though that may be appropriate during a period of time, ultimately you have to come back to consciousness. Ultimately you have to wake up.
And another one of your many words that have stuck with me over the years we spoke was you did mention the drinking a little bit, and we always got breakfast early in the morning, so I didn't notice anything. So unless you're having cocktails in the morning, you did mention something about when you did kind of either slow down the drinking, that the drinking may have numbed you in certain ways, which is kind of the benefit of drinking. And then that's when you did you start feeling certain emotions that perhaps you felt them more powerfully? Is that true? Or did you start noticing your feelings a little more?
Well, I think, no, I wouldn't put it like that. I think I've always felt my feelings really deeply, but I do think alcohol takes you to the place of feeling really down about your feelings. Like, there are plenty of times when I had a couple of cocktails and went home and cried for a while,
That's why I drink tequila. Tequila is a little more of an upper.
Well, I was feeling my feelings, but I think that what I'm really saying is to look at it soberly is a way of really taking in, okay, this is what my life is now. And I needed to look at all of the aspects of my life with David, not just the good things, not just the part I missed, but also the parts that were difficult. His struggles with mental illness went on through the entire 10 years we were together. It got better, it got worse, it got better, it got worse. It got better for a very, very long period of time, and then worse again right at the end. But all of that took a toll on me, physically and mentally, and including the full picture of somebody too, really understanding that he wasn't just the person I romanticized to be the greatest person in the world, though I do think he was definitely one of the finest people I've ever met. But that's not all that he was. He was a very complicated person who was responsible for his own spiritual journey in this life. He was responsible to do what he needed to do to take care of himself. Now, again, it comes back to that place of, well, how much can somebody really take care of themselves if they're sick? I've been sick with a virus. I've been sick with asthma. I've been sick with, a stomach flu. And there have been times when I've been lying on my bathroom floor after throwing up into the toilet and just thinking, I could die right now and it makes no difference. And that's a really powerful place to get to, I think, because I do think that if you really understand just how bad somebody might be feeling, that you can start to cognize just how difficult the suicidal mindset must be. And I don't know, I think that there's a tendency when you're sentimental and crying after getting inebriated. It's all about me. It's not about him. The fact of the matter is that I cried a lot for my own loss, as opposed to really taking in just how difficult his life was for him. And as I say, I don't think that suicide is a rational choice. But maybe it is with some people. I don't believe it was with David. I think there was real distorted thinking, but he was ill. There was an illness. And in the same way that with Tim's death, because he was also very ill in a different way, but very ill, like I said, there was a point at which, all right, well, this isn't working anymore. The body is unable to sustain this life. And I think it's a complicated thing. And I think that the real lesson I think I've learned in the past few years is to stay in the paradox, to exist in the paradox, to exist in the question of, well, will I ever really understand it? No, I won't. I don't understand why some people get sick and some people don't. I don't understand why my first significant other, Tim Scott, got this virus and I was never infected. I don't understand why some people get cancer and others don't. I don't understand why some people get pneumonia and others don't. COVID affects some people and doesn't affect other people at all. There's no right or wrong to it. There's no justice. It's not like life is fair in some sense. It isn't. These weird, random things happen. Weird, random illnesses affect people every single day, and people sometimes survive and sometimes they don't. And then also weird accidents happen. People get in car wrecks or terrorist attacks happen and buildings fall down. We live in a world of paradox. We live in a world where things are constantly changing, and to really have the courage to look at that and go, okay, I see that this is so. So I must take advantage of every moment that's given to me and live my life as consciously as possible. And so that's where I think the growth has happened for me over the last 6 years, is to get back to a place where I feel I choose to participate in life fully, even facing the idea that it could end at any time and that I could lose something else that's very important to me. I still choose to live life as fully as possible. That's where I think I've come to over the 6 years since David's died.
How did you get there?
Well, I think it just requires a real willingness to look at all of the things I just described. That there are no guarantees, that there are no easy answers. There's not like some justice that we're all entitled to. It doesn't work that way. We're basically, I don't quite understand what this life is about. But I do know that the key is to move towards more life, more consciousness, working towards an experience of it where you're more aware and awake and open to it, and open to all that it can bring to you, both good and bad. The struggle of my relationships was one of the most profound things about both relationships. I learned through the struggle. I think I told you I'm staying here at my mom's house. My mom is 95 years old. My mom has had so much loss in her life. She lost her father when she was 13. She lost her brother in World War II. She lost my father at 65. She was in an automobile accident when she was 10 with her grandmother, and her grandmother was killed. She lost two of her best little girlfriends when she was growing up. She lost her mother and her sister, who she cared for in the final years of their life. That example of a woman who has faced, unbelievable loss, and yet has never lost her sense of optimism, has never lost her sense of participation in life. I've taken real inspiration from that, and it's been good being here with her and just recognizing that we don't know what the destination is. I mean, 95, she's in a sense living on borrowed time at this point, but she's still living with a real expectation and openness to whatever is next. And I just really take a lot of encouragement from her, and she's taught me a lot, and she even told me, I remember, after Tim's death in 1988, she was just like, Norman, I know how horrible it feels right now, but you will feel better. Because, I just at that point didn't believe that I ever would. I didn't believe that I would ever feel better. I thought my life was over at 32. I thought it was over. And then I thought it was over again when David died when I was 59. And that hasn't proven to be the case. And looking at my mother's life, I just recognize that we put one foot in front of the other and we go forward. Well, go ahead.
No, please. Your spotlight's on you, not me.
Well, no. What were you gonna say?
I mean, it's just, oh man, it's remarkable how someone like you had your bumps along the road, as we're discussing, and you had the choice. We all have the choice to go one way or the other, right? And you chose the optimistic side, whether that was, because you looked at, for example, you said, people look at what you've experienced as a tragedy, which, inherently it is, but you were grateful for the relationships that you have with your partner. Then you look at your mother, who went through her, ebbs and flows of life and still stayed optimistic. So the ability that you took and the path that you took to stay optimistic, I wonder if that's harder than taking the other path, because other people that may go through similar experiences like you have, just death and whatever it may be, can easily just become cynical and then take the other path. So my question to you is, whether it's maybe you answered it already, you're saying you look to your mother perhaps. What makes you or anyone in your own experience choose that path of optimism, when I feel like just as easily or more or not, you can just choose the other path and, stay downhill? Like, what made you decide to continue climbing uphill and say, this is it? Because for what I'm taking from you, my interpretation, correct me if I'm wrong, is you learned a level of acceptance that this is the way it is. So,
well, I think that I hesitate to talk about my spirituality too much because I think it's too easy for it to become something that's didactic and dogmatic, and I really avoid, those kinds of conversations with people because I don't like to debate the finer points of how many angels can stand on the head of a pin. But I do believe that there is a spiritual component to life if one is open to it. If one is open to it, there is an aspect of life that is not only mysterious, but constantly supporting your growth in showing you signs of I'm a big believer in the ideas of Carl Jung, the idea of synchronicity, and the idea that the world seems to constantly be reflecting itself back to itself. And I do think that anything that I've been through pales in comparison to what other people on the planet have been through throughout history. And I feel like I've led an extraordinarily fortunate life, and I've had great success in my career, and I've had great friendships, and I've had two great relationships that were very happy. Both of them were very happy relationships in spite of what happened. So I do believe that those relationships are still alive for me. They're not gone just because the physical incarnation of them is gone. And it sounds mysterious, and I don't necessarily want to again try to boil it down to something dogmatic, because I think it's mysterious. It's a mysterious aspect, but I feel deeply spiritual, and I oftentimes compare our physical life to our iPhones. There is this transmitting device that transmits all this information that exists in the cloud, and the transmitting device has designed obsolescence in it in the same way that our bodies do, and the information in the cloud continues to exist, and whether or not this iPhone is working or not, and I really do believe that our technology is always catching up to our consciousness, in a sense, our spirituality. There is something to be said for this idea that what we experience, that we call love, that we call connection, that we call God, that we call that intrinsic sense of an epiphany, exists separate and apart from whatever's happening with our body. Like I said, I could be lying on the floor of the bathroom next to the toilet, feeling sick to my stomach, and there's still something that exists separate and apart from that thing that is sick on the floor. Now, that's a mystery. That's a mystery how that works, but it's also a mystery how my iPhone works and how all of this stuff just happens to exist when I need it out of this transmitter. And I've had enough what I would call mystical experiences, and enough experiences of great comfort, even that make me feel like, okay, I don't understand everything about what the human experience is about, but I do want to move more and more towards that idea of being more awake to whatever it is. And I feel that self-pity gets in the way of that. So if one tends to feel like, oh, woe is me, my life has been hard, this is difficult, I've lost this or that, this person has left me, this relationship is broken. If one comes from that place of self-pity, then one isn't awake to the mystery that's revealing itself all the time. There's a lot that I could tell you that's happened to me since both of the losses that I've had. And, it's not just the losses of my significant others. It's I lost my father. I lost my analyst who I'd seen for 15 years. I've lost a lot of people who've been very important to me during the AIDS crisis. I turned 65 in a couple of weeks. There's not a lot of gay men my age because so many of them died in the first onslaught of AIDS in the 80s. And I lost so many people that were friends of mine. Just there was a period of time where every day I opened the paper and there was somebody else who had passed away. So, I've gone through a lot of real disappointment and loss. And yet if I chose to turn inward and just feel sorry for myself, then I wouldn't be aware of how life continually presents opportunities for comfort and continually presents opportunities for greater and greater awareness. And death is a part of that. Death is a part of life. Yeah. And we don't have any trouble looking out at the trees in autumn and see all of the trees basically dying for the winter. We don't have any trouble with just saying that, oh, well, that's just nature. That's just the cycle of nature. And every tree doesn't have the same experience. It's not like, oh, it's so unfair. This tree over here lost its leaves earlier, and this tree, kept its leaves for a longer time. I mean, we don't make those kinds of judgments about nature. We don't make those kinds of judgments about these things that are very natural processes, but for some reason, our ego gets activated, and we really think that, like, oh, well, my life is not as full and wonderful as I wanted it to be, and I'm comparing my life to this person over here, and they've got more of this, or they've got more of that, and I feel like you have two choices in the world. Either you can go down that road, or you can, just accept that, okay, this is what my road has been. This has been what my journey is. And I just have to accept that for whatever reason, this, or even there may not even be a reason. It may just be like, this just is what is. It is what is. And I really want to fully take it in for whatever the experience is, as opposed to trying to deny the experience or not even take in the experience because I'm so busy feeling sorry for myself. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot.
I feel like I said a whole lot of shit there that I don't even know if any of it makes any sense.
No, it's interesting because I feel like you answered my question without like stating it, if that makes any sense. Because you started delivering all these words that gave me a feeling, and I was like, "Holy shit, this is the answer! Is the feeling you just delivered?" I love the analogy with the leaves and the trees, because I feel like when a lot of people, even myself, or just when I hear, I don't want to speak for anyone and generalize, but I feel like there is a diagnosis for the idea of death, that it's the end of life. But at the same time, I believe that death, and I heard someone else, my other friend, put it so elegantly, is like, death really is a part of life. And I think it's not separate from life, even though it seems like it severs it. But I think you have done such a remarkable job of, realizing that at the end of the day, like the way I would say it from the East Coast of town is like, this is what it is. It is what it is. And it's not a sad thing. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just life, baby. And that's what it is. And that's what we're dealing with. And so I think, and I think also I love when you mentioned synchronicities, because I'm a big believer in that too. And that's kind of like, that is a sense of comfort, as long as we're awoke, as long as we're, I hate to say woke, because that's become very commercialized these days. But when you are open to life, like you are, to notice these things, I think if we just opened our senses, opened our eyes, and just notice these things, because there are synchronicities in life. I mean, it might be very little. It might be walking across the street. It might be a dream, whatever it might be. But those little synchronicities are a little reminder in life that, hey, there's so much more that we don't know, and we should be maybe excited about it. It's a little nudge from whatever, letting us know that things are okay. And I love those synchronicities. I'm a big believer in that too, that I feel like you've experienced yourself. Perhaps when you're saying mystic, or is that what you're referring to? Are you referring to synchronicities?
Very much so. I mean, I have them all the time, and I think that the only time that I'm not kind of living in that space, experiencing them, is when I'm feeling sorry for myself. And I find that they tend to really respond to my own openness to the experience of life. Since I've been here, I've been in Texas for the past several weeks, and every evening, just because there's not a lot to do with COVID going on, I go down and I walk by the river that's quite near my mother's house. I walk for a couple of miles every night, and I'm so just comforted by just being close to nature and seeing the sunsets. I usually go walking around sunset and all of these things that I forget about when I get very, very busy, when I get very caught up in work and or surfing on my phone all the time or something like that. And it's been a frustrating thing that we've all been going through with COVID. And yet I've heard many people say that this whole experience has brought them back to a slower way of existence, and in a certain sense awaken them to where they've been out of balance. And that's certainly been the case for me. I've really been spending a lot of time just thinking, just allowing, not even thinking, just feeling nature. And I do sense that what you just described about death is a part of life. Life is this process of generation, and it sustains for a while, and then it decays, and then it regenerates. And the planet has not changed. It's not like, everybody that was here 100 years ago just evaporated and went somewhere else. No, it's kind of like the whatever consciousness is, however it arises in our psyche, it's still here. It's still growing. It's still expanding. And I think it's a wonderful idea to think that I contribute what I contribute to life and consciousness, and then at a certain point, this container, this transmitter, so to speak, will no longer work. But I don't believe that consciousness disappears. I believe it just rejoins the greater consciousness and continues to move forward. And it's mysterious. I don't think we can describe something that's mysterious. That's the very nature of
if we could describe it, I guess if we could describe it, it wouldn't be mysterious.
Right? No. I mean, the very nature of an epiphany is that awareness of something that cannot be described. Yeah. And I really believe that when I hear people try to, I get very irritated when I get into religious debates with people, because I feel like that then the minute you start to try to define the nature of what anybody wants to call God, it's reductive. The minute you try to boil it down to some anthropomorphic type of entity, then it ceases to have the mystery. And I don't know, I feel, even on my walks in the evening, I feel all of these people with me, these people that I've lost, my significant others, but then also my ancestors. I feel like that there is this. I heard this great quote. Let me see if I can find it really quick.
Well, I mean, the idea of energy alone. I brought this up in many podcasts, but I'm kind of with you on. We're kind of in a vessel right now, And then that idea of consciousness and whatnot, it's going somewhere. I don't know where it's going.
Yeah.
That's kind of the exciting part too. It's
Yeah.
like, it's scary. It's exciting. It's all this shit that I try to not to go down the rabbit hole. And I often do, especially having these conversations. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I think as humans, we kind of fear inherently what we don't know. But as soon as we can embrace that, I don't know, but I feel this, I feel that, and I'm going to stay optimistic. Then it's like, it's a fun ride.
Yeah, it is a fun ride. You're right, and it's a fun ride to really admit. I mean, there's that great quote. I forget who said this, but it's like, the more I know I don't know, the closer I am to God. I love that quote.
I don't know that quote, but there's a Bono in a U2 song said, I don't know if it's the same thing. I'm going from that very spiritual, very beautiful quote to Bono of U2, but he said, the more you see, the less you know. But it was just kind of, I don't know if that's the same thing, but it's, I get it. Things are not always black and white, and it's okay not to know.
Here's this quote by Carl Jung that I just found yesterday. Psychologically, the central point of a human personality is the place where the ancestors are reincarnated. I love that idea. I love the idea that, what we essentially are is the leading edge of where consciousness has gotten to. And we each participate in that movement forward. And Tim, my first significant other, and David, my husband, both of them taught me so much, and I just gained so much from both of those relationships that they still are alive in me in terms of what I put out there in the world. There is something of them in me, and once I'm no longer here, I would like to think that whoever has come into contact with me on whatever good, to whatever good degree I impacted their lives, then they will carry that forward as well. And it's one of the reasons why I'm really interested in teaching. I teach at UCLA right now, and I really enjoy passing on what I know about my work, and I enjoy doing podcasts like this because I feel like, well, that's all we really have to offer is, well, my experience is this, and in what way can it support your experience, and how can you carry it forward? And I think that I rebel a little bit against that phrase. I say it all the time, but that idea is it is what it is, just because it has a certain kind of cynical resignation to it. Yep. But I think it's important to say it in a way that has a certain kind of energy behind it. It is what it is, and it's so beautiful.
Exactly. That's a very good point. It's a very good point.
If one can really embrace it from that place, and all of it, no matter, I've had lots of great successes, but I've also had real failures. I've fallen on my face sometimes and had real disappointments and had real unhappy experiences over the years as well. And to include all of that, and I'm going through my mother's garage cleaning out some of this stuff, going through all these boxes, and I find things. I find pictures of myself, or I find old notebooks of mine, and I'm just like, oh my God, what an idiot I was back then. And then I just think, no, that was part of your journey too. That was part of who you were. That's part of what you were going through, and you learned from that, and then you moved on. And I think that if one can really embrace life that way, with a real sense of wonder and expectation and faith, faith in whatever you want to put that faith in. I don't want to, again, and I don't want it to kind of boil down to some type of legalistic discussion about one's religious values, but faith in some sense of a greater whole, that however you choose to view the collective consciousness, it's faith that it is moving forward, that we are moving towards something that is more refined, and God. I mean, all you have to do is look at human history and see that that's so. Yeah. So where is it going? I don't know. I won't find out in my lifetime, but
And I was just going to say,
is there even a destination, or is it just a process?
I don't know. That's why I think it's so important to, I guess, when they say enjoy the journey, as cliched as it is, like this, because the journey is all we know. Like, the journey is the now, and this is all we know. We can speculate all we want, and I think it's important to be, optimistic, because why not? But at the end of the day, it's funny you said "is what it is," because I say it all the time, and I never really thought about the inflection. But it is important. You can say it is what it is, and it's dismal and like, with Jesus, dude, relax. But when you say it is, when you say it is what it is with a smile on your face, like it is what it is. But this is what we're doing. It's like it doesn't have to be so morbid, and it is what it is, and we're screwed. Like, no, like as long as I think it's, in my opinion, I like to live life where it's a ride. We're in a ride, and we can stay excited about it, but there are those pockets of things that happen in life where it's really hard to say that, where it's like what you said when you were 32, that you thought that this was it, and then in that moment you thought that, but you got out of it, whoever the hell you did it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And have you read any books or listened to any YouTube videos by Alan Watts?
I've listened to YouTube rants from Alan Watts. He's incredible. He's out there, but he's incredible.
Yeah, he's so out there.
I love it, though.
I do. Yeah, but like that's basically his point of view, is kind of like, this is what's happening, and this is the experience of life, and it doesn't have necessarily some happy ending to it. Doesn't mean that some people can't have a happy ending. Some people do. Some people, but everybody at some point is going to have to deal with the fact that it ends. It comes to a conclusion.
So we think, possibly, right?
And it comes to a conclusion in terms of what our ego understands about it. I should say that.
Yes. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, the fact that what our ego wants, of some type of I need to get to this. Like, oftentimes I don't even understand where people are trying to get to, because
we're all racing. There is that sense that we're racing somewhere, and everyone's like a chicken with their head off, including myself. Yeah. And that's why I love when you said about this, slowing things down. I've always had this mentality of working and this and that. And as the years gone on, I've gone more and more of thinking, I don't want to work my life away. Yeah. Everything is going okay right now, and I want to do this, I want to do that. But there's moments of, when I really think of, like my dad used to say, or I learned from my dad, I remember from my dad, is he was so infatuated with like the little things. At the end of the day, the little things in life tends to be the best things in the way I perceive it. And the way I can deduce from like the little things is just those small little like slow moments, those little subtleties, those tiny moments where everything is moving slower. And it's not that like that big moment that is so, emphatic that we like the big shine. It's like the big shiny thing that seems to be like that on paper looks like the best, but it's not. It's like when things are moving slow and you just really take a moment just to stay there. That is what it's all about. So those little walks that you go through is really when you can really contemplate life and really feel nature and feel life. Is those slow moments. If you're moving too fast, it's hard to feel.
Yeah. I had a really interesting experience with my grandmother. One of my grandmothers lived to be 102. And towards the end of her life, when she was about 100, she was starting to fade a little bit. But the thing that she remembered and the thing that she talked about the most was her horse. She had homesteaded out on the South Dakota prairie when she was 21, and she had a really close relationship with her horse. And her horse was what she would talk about the most and remember the most. And she would even have this description of her experience with the horse where he would come and knock on her window and bow down before her and flip her on over his head, and then she'd ride out across the prairie. And it was almost mythological the way that she would describe it. And I just was so fascinated by that, because I thought, here she's had this life. She had these two sons. She has all these grandchildren that are, successful and living their lives. And yet what she really remembered was this experience of this horse and her relationship with this horse. And it made me think that maybe we all have those experiences in our lives where this is what our life is really about. This is where she felt the most herself, was this experience of riding this horse. And that was where she was the most present. That was where she was the most in her body and experiencing her life as this very ephemeral thing, but something that had great meaning for her. And so I've really taken a lot of inspiration from that. And as I said, the greatest thing about my marriage when David was alive was I never took him for granted. So when we would be traveling or when we would be spending time together, I was really fully present with him, because I just also was aware that every day that he felt good and things were going well was a really great day. And I was really able to take in that experience of living with him and traveling alongside of him for those 10 years in a way that I don't think I would have been able to do had I not had the previous loss. I don't think I would have been as attuned to it. I don't think I would have been as open to having as rich an experience as I had, because I would have been worried about the future or worried about the past, as opposed to being fully in the moment. And so I kind of take that as a challenge. And it's hard now, because it's hard not to get caught up in like, oh, that was my life. That was the most meaningful thing in my life, as opposed to staying in the space of like, well, no, my life continues to be meaningful in every encounter, in every moment. And I need to constantly bring that same lesson to my experience now. And you were talking about the difference that you've seen in me since we first met. And I think that's probably the biggest difference, is that I've gotten back to that space of like, don't take it for granted, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
That is a real discipline. Because I like to think I'm very aware of that, but there's moments in my own life where, certain things happen, and then whether it's just the natural emotional reaction, or whether it's frustration, this or that, whatever we have, then it takes it. I think it's when that happens to me, I don't know, you can speak for yourself, but that discipline is like that initial feeling, whatever it is, of staying in the moment. There's always that reactionary period where like you might be gravitating the other way, but part of the lesson is realizing it, like catching yourself, and then stepping in and saying like, be here right now, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like even just like in relationships, for example, like maybe in like a past relationship, I would have done this, I would have got frustrated. But then like in a next relationship where that same trigger happens, that might make me frustrated. But in the moment I might be frustrated, but then I collect myself as saying, due to my last experience, be like, you know what? It's okay. Like like you learn from that last experience, but it takes true discipline to hit that switch. It doesn't just like, you're not just cured from there and out. Like from moving forward, you gotta be cognitive of it in the moment in order to cure the moment, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, you've got to make a choice in any given moment to be present.
Yeah,
it's mindfulness. I mean, there's all kinds of mindfulness training now, and a lot of people talk about doing it and they realize how hard it is, but it's really just about choosing to experience the moment for what it has to bring you, good or bad. And I think that's what a lot of people don't want. They don't want any bad experiences. They want to be happy all the time. And happiness is not the goal. Yeah, I really don't believe that happiness is the goal. Meaning is the goal. There's real difficulty sometimes. One of my brothers is in the hospital right now. My other two siblings have both had surgery since I've been here, which has been stressful for all of us. It's not like, oh, it's been happy and fun the whole time, but it's been really meaningful. It's been meaningful to be here during that period of time in which they've all had their various struggles, and to really be able to look at one's life and find meaning in the difficulty as well as the joy, and to see that life really is all of it. And
the struggle is real. Yeah. That's where you learn it. That's where you learn.
And I do believe, the people who have been through great losses like yourself or myself, or the people who at least have been willing to look at the losses of others with a really clear eye, as opposed to just like, I don't want to pretend that that's happening over there. I do believe that those people have a way into this deeper experience that we're talking about, a way into the being present, that it is a gift. And I don't want to suggest in any way that I wouldn't change the circumstances of Tim's death, of David's death. But I also realized, well, I've become such a different kind of person having gone through both of these experiences. And while I would do anything to have changed it for them, for myself, I really have grown through these these very difficult experiences. And as I said, that's why I would do it all over again. If I had the choice, I would definitely, I'd do it again. I wouldn't hesitate.
That's a big driving force of what I'm trying to do here is I think, we share our own experience of loss and different magnitudes. You've been through essentially, I'm not doing a hierarchy again, but you've been a lot more than me, I feel like, in regards to quantitating the amount of deaths you experienced and all that. But I think the challenge, what I'm doing here is getting through to those people. Cause I've always told people that haven't experienced loss or whatever, haven't gone through certain things, that I don't want them to wait for it to happen to gain that insight or gain that enlightenment. And it's like, and that's why the challenge of this podcast, it's such a niche conversation that, gravitating towards people, listeners that have experienced death are the low hanging fruit, quote unquote. They're like, I would love to get to those people, but I really also want to get, just as much as I want to get to those people, I really want to get to the people that haven't experienced death. And that's why I think the conversation that we're having, being objective and we're talking about it, it's not a sad conversation. It's a conversation about life. No. It's like, how do we get through our day-to-day lives to make those people realize it too? And it's not our job to make people realize. That's not what I'm saying. But it'd be a wonderful thing if people that haven't gone through this don't wait for trauma or tragedy or something to happen in order to, realize these things.
I feel like that one of the things I think you're speaking to is that having gone through great loss gives you much more courage. And I think that a lot of people live their life trying to control things and hold things off that are difficult and try to keep from having a full experience because they're afraid they might lose something. And I do think that that's a neurosis, and that's something that, if one has an experience of I don't want to say like an epiphany about death, but that would be the epiphany, is that like, okay, I faced this, that gives me more courage to now face life. I faced death, now I can face life. Really, I can really not just face it, but embrace it. And I think that that's been the greatest growth for me, is just that I've faced it all. I can't lose any more than I've already lost. There's nothing else to lose. So I might as well participate full out in the time that's left to me, at least in this experience, at least in this incarnation, and who knows what comes next?
Who the hell knows? But we're all kind of, whether we like to say it or not, we're all kind of, sitting in the same seat right now, trying to figure out what happens next. And then one buddy made a funny kind of point. He's like, talking about death. It's like all these other people, they all these millions and millions of people that have died before us, they went through it. So, how bad could it be? But I guess we'll see. But Norm, thank you. And I think it's always a lesson for me to talk to you, and I'm hoping.
It's always great to talk to you too, David. I really enjoy our friendship, even though, as you said, it just seems like we see each other once every few months. But it's always great to catch up with you. Yeah,
when you get back to LA, and you'll be when you start working again. You said January, probably.
Right now we're scheduled to start prepping in the end of January and start shooting in March. But who knows with COVID? We're riding the wave. We're just trying to figure things out right now. We're just like watching the figures, just trying to figure out.
Amen. All right, Norm, I want to say thank you again. Thank you for doing this. Norman Buckley, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you tuned into the end, and thank you for joining us with another episode of Dead Talks. Thanks, everyone. That was great.
Yeah, thanks, David.
That was phenomenal. I feel like we're sitting down in Yugos right now, to be honest. This is great.
Well, I hope it was. It's always hard. Like sometimes I just talk and I have no idea what I'm saying.
No.
Like I said, there's a part of me that's like, I hope that made sense. But.
No, believe me, it makes sense because I don't know. You're so articulate with just explaining how you feel, and that's the whole fucking goal. Excuse my language. So, I was really looking forward to this because we've spoke about a lot of this before, but I'm sure you've done these podcasts already talking about your history, but hopefully it gets to some other people that There's plenty of people that need it. There's plenty of people that need this shit, especially what you've gone through. That's the whole point. And like, you're willing to talk about it. I think that's 90% of the battle. And obviously with what I'm trying to do here, I don't want to make it as sad of a discussion. I feel like what we just spoke about, as sad as the topic is, it wasn't sad. It was like, it was rejuvenated, and you spoke about life, and that's all I want to accomplish here. So I can't thank you enough.
It's great. Well, it's always good to see you. So I think right now I'm planning to come back in December, as long as I got to see what the travel advisories are, because I need to come back for a few weeks, but I may wait through Christmas and then come back in January and then go to Atlanta. I don't know. I haven't made up my mind yet. Well,
let me know if you get, depending how comfortable you feel with everything that's going on. I would love to see you catch up this way again.
Yeah, me too.
All right, I'll send you the final episode when it's all done, and you can let me know what you think.
Terrific. Thanks,
Norm. Good to see you, bud.
Yeah, bye.